Welcome to Back on the Stack, a cEDH podcast. Tonight we're bringing you another cEDH gameplay video. Please leave a comment below and tell us what you think of the production. Let's get right into it and see what decks are being piloted tonight. Going first, we have Levi piloting Thrasios and Rograk. For his opening hand, he kept Rejuvenating Springs, Neoform, Trophy Mage, Spellseeker, Flusterstorm, Force of Negation, and a Mystic Remora. Second, we have Rage piloting Codie. For his opening hand, he kept Lion's Eye Diamond, Vampiric Tutor, Ad Nauseam, Simian Spirit Guide, Elvish Spirit Guide, Ancient Tomb, and his one London mulligan was a Profane Tutor. Thirdly, we have Eli piloting Rogsai. For his opening hand, he kept Mystic Remora, Badlands, Jessica's Will, Mana Vault, and his three London mulligans were Conqueror's Flail, Defense Grid, and Mana Vault. In fourth seat, we have J-Rock piloting Thrasios and Francisco. For his opening hand, he kept Sensei's Top, Tainted Pact, Bajuka Bog, Mox Diamond, Minamo School at Water's Edge, Phantasmal Image, and his one London mulligan was a Reanimate. With introductions out of the way, Levi will kick us off. He draws and plays a Rejuvenating Springs. He cast a Mystic Remora. He cast his commander, Rograk, son of Roga. Rage draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He cast a Mana Crypt. Fish triggers and Levi draws. He loses 2 life through Ancient Tomb and casts his commander, Codie, Vociferous Codex. He passes his turn. Eli draws and plays a Badland. He also casts his commander, Rograk. He casts a Mana Vault. Fish triggers and Levi draws. Eli passes the turn. J-Rock draws and plays a Minamo. He casts a Mox Diamond. Fish triggers and Levi draws. It ETBs and J-Rock discards a Bajuka Bog. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He passes the turn. Levi untaps, and in his upkeep he pays for Remora. He draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He taps it, pays 1 life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He moves to clean up and discards a Moonsnare, Prototype, and a Neoform. The turn moves to Rage. Rage untaps and loses his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and immediately pays 4 to activate Codie. He adds Wooburg to his mana pool. Rage casts a Silence. Fish triggers and Levi draws. Codie triggers and Rage reveals cards from his library until he hits the only legal target in his deck, a Profane Tutor. Now with Silence on the stack, Levi casts a Force of Negation for its alternative casting cost, exiling a Spellseeker. It resolves and Silence is countered and exiled. Rage then casts the Profane Tutor from exile without paying its mana cost through Codie's ability. He tutors up a card into his hand. He then uses all of his floating mana to cast a Calling Ritual. Fish triggers and Levi draws. Levi then casts a Flusterstorm with all 5 copies targeting Calling Ritual. It resolves, and with his win attempt stopped, Rage passes the turn. Eli draws and casts a Jessica's Will, targeting Levi and choosing both modes. Fish triggers and Levi draws. It resolves, and Eli adds 8 red mana to his pool. He then exiles the top 3 cards of his library, which are Dockside Extortionist, Ancient Tomb, and a Warrior's Oath. He uses his floating colorless from the Mana Vault and 1 red to cast the Dockside. It ETBs and he creates 4 treasures. He cracks 1 treasure and casts a Mystic Remora. Levi's Remora triggers and he draws. Eli casts a Demonic Tutor. Levi's Fish triggers again and he draws again. Eli tutors a card into his hand and then casts Ad Nauseam. Levi's Remora triggers and he draws. Ad Naus resolves and Eli reveals Windfall, Flusterstorm, Calling the Weak, Born Upon the Wind, Snap, Pyroblast, Mystical Tutor, Infernal Plunge, Polluted Delta, Gemstone Caverns, Bloodstained Mire, Ragavan, Praetor's Grasp, Mox Diamond, Arcane Signet, Exotic Orchard, Conqueror's Flail, Mox Amber, Defense Grid, Orcish Bowmasters, Paradise Mantle, Mana Crypt, Beseech the Mirror, Mount Doom, Underground Sea, Felwar Stone, and a Fierce Guardianship, deciding to stop there. Eli casts a Mana Crypt. Levi's Fish triggers and he draws. Eli casts a Defense Grid. Fish triggers again, and Levi draws. He casts a Mox Diamond. Fish triggers, Levi draws. Diamond ETBs, and Eli discards a Bloodstained Mire. He casts a Mox Amber. Fish triggers, Levi draws. Eli casts a Snap targeting his own Dockside. Levi draws from Fish, and Eli bounces the Dockside and untaps his Badlands. He recasts Dockside and creates another 4 treasures. He casts a Mystical Tutor, and Levi draws from Fish. Eli tutors up a Demonic Consultation to the top of his library. He plays an Underground Sea for turn. He casts Born Upon the Wind, and Levi draws from Fish. Born Upon the Wind resolves, and Eli draws a card. He casts Calling the Weak, sacrificing Rograk as an additional cost. Levi draws, and Eli adds 4 black to his mana pool. He uses all 4 black to cast Beseech the Mirror, bargaining it by sacrificing his mana vault. Levi draws, and Eli then tutors a Thassa's Oracle into exile. He then casts Thassa's Oracle from exile without paying the mana cost due to the bargaining on Beseech. With the ETB trigger on the stack, Eli casts Demonic Consultation, naming Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Levi draws from Fish. Demonic Consultation resolves, and Eli exiles his entire library. Thassa's ETB goes back on the stack, and Eli wins the game. Well, the best thing about a turn 2 win is that the group gets to shuffle up and play again. Seats were randomly assigned, but the turn order actually stayed the same. Going first again, we've got Levi. For his opening hand, he kept Crop Rotation, Taiga, Windswept Heath, Transmute Artifact, Kinnan Bonder Prodigy, Lotus Petal, and Force of Negation. Second, we have Rage. For his opening hand, he kept a Mana Crypt, City of Traders, Crystal Vein, Vampiric Tutor, Sacrifice, Silence, and Flooded Strand. Third, we have Eli. For his opening hand, he kept a Rite of Flame, Diabolic Intent, Felwar Stone, Bloodstained Mire, Orcish Bowmasters, Ancient Tomb, and a Mana Crypt. And in fourth seat again, we have J-Rock. He kept a Felwar Stone, Force of Negation, Veil of Summer, Mindbreak Trap, Crone Mox, Watery Grave, and a Jeweled Lotus. Ready to battle it out once again, Levi will kick us off. He draws and plays a Taiga. He casts his commander, Rograk. He casts a Crop Rotation, sacrificing Taiga as an additional cost. He tutors up a Gaia's Cradle onto the battlefield. He casts a Lotus Petal. He sacrifices his Lotus Petal to add a blue, and then casts Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. Levi passes the turn. Rage draws and plays a Flooded Strand. He taps it, loses 1 life, and fetches up a Tropical Island onto the battlefield. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts his commander, Codie, Vociferous Codex. He passes his turn. Eli draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He taps it, pays 1 life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He also casts his commander, Rograk. He casts a Mana Crypt. He casts a Felwar Stone. Eli passes the turn. J-Rock draws and shocks in a Watery Grave. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. He sacrifices the Jeweled Lotus and casts his commander, Francisco, Foul Marauder. He casts a Crone Mox. It ETBs, and he exiles a Veil of Summer. He casts a Felwar Stone. J-Rock attempts to pass the turn, but in response, Eli flashes in an Orcish Bowmaster. It ETBs, Eli amasses an Orc army, and then pings Levi's Rograk, killing it. The turn then moves to Levi. Levi draws and plays a Mox Diamond. It ETBs, and he discards a Windswept Heath. He passes his turn. In Rage's upkeep, he loses his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a City of Traders. He pays 4 to activate Codie. He adds Wooburg to his mana pool. The table laughs at how similar this game is shaping up to be. Then Rage casts a Crop Rotation, sacrificing City of Traders as an additional cost. Codie triggers, and Rage reveals cards from the top of his library until he hits the only legal target in his deck, a Profane Tutor. Then Crop Rotation resolves, and he tutors up a command tower onto the battlefield. Rage then casts the Profane Tutor from exile without paying its mana cost through Codie's ability. He tutors up a card into his hand. Rage then casts Silence. In response, Levi casts a Force of Negation for its alternative casting cost, exiling a Transmute Artifact. It resolves, and Silence is countered and exiled. Rage uses his floating black to cast Sacrifice, sacrificing Codie as an additional cost. It resolves, and he adds 3 black to his mana pool. He then spends Wooburg to cast Bring to Light. In response, Levi saves the table again by casting a Mana Drain. It resolves, Bring to Light is countered, and Levi will add 5 colorless mana in his next main phase. Rage then casts a Vampiric Tutor. He loses 2 life and tutors up a card to the top of his library, and then passes his turn. In his upkeep, Eli wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and moves directly into combat. He swings Bowmasters and his Oak Army, both at Rage. He takes 2 damage. In his second main phase, he casts Diabolic Intent, sacrificing the Orc Army as an additional cost. He then plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts a Dockside Extortionist. It ETBs, and he creates 4 treasures. He then casts a Praetor's Grasp, targeting Rage. Without a good way to properly resolve this spell over webcam, Eli tells the group that he is exiling Rage's Time Twister. Eli then casts a Rite of Flame and adds 2 red to his mana pool. Eli then casts Rage's Time Twister from exile. In response, J-Rock casts a Fierce Guardianship for its alternative casting cost. It resolves and counters Time Twister. Eli passes the turn. J-Rock draws and casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He passes the turn. Levi draws and in his first main phase adds 5 colorless mana through Mana Drain. He casts a Paradise Mantle. He uses one of the floating colorless to equip to Kinnan. He also casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He activates Thrasios and draws a Fellwar Stone. Bowmaster's triggers and Eli pings Kinnan for 1. Levi then decides to pass his turn. In his upkeep, Rage loses his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and casts a Mox Opal. He plays a Crystal Vein for turn. He recasts Codie. Rage then passes his turn. In his upkeep, Eli wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and casts his other commander, Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. The table jokes that Eli obviously has nothing else to spend his mana on this turn. He agrees and passes his turn. J-Rock draws, misses his land drop again, and moves to his end step. However, in response, Levi activates Thrasios and reveals a Verdant Catacombs onto the battlefield tapped. The turn then moves to Levi. Levi untaps and draws. He taps his Verdant Catacombs, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He then casts Neoform, sacrificing Thrasios as an additional cost. It resolves and he tutors up a Trophy Mage onto the battlefield. It ETBs and he tutors a Basalt Monolith into hand. He recasts his commander, Thrasios. He then taps out to cast the Basalt Monolith, but in response, J-Rock casts a Mindbreak Trap for its alternate casting cost. It resolves and exiles Basalt Monolith. When attempt thwarted, Levi passes the turn. In his upkeep, Rage wins his Crypt roll. He draws and plays an Arid Mesa. He passes his turn. In his upkeep, Eli also wins his Crypt roll. He draws, moves through phases, and passes the turn. J-Rock draws and casts his own Kinnan. It resolves and he passes the turn. Levi draws and then decides to make editing this video very difficult. He taps Kinnan through Paradise Mantle, creating 2 green mana. He uses one of the floating to equip the mantle to Trophy Mage. Mage is then tapped for 2 mana, and the mantle is moved to Thrasios. Thrasios is then tapped for 2 mana, and Levi is left with 4 floating green mana and all of his creatures tapped. He uses all 4 of the green mana to activate Thrasios. He reveals and draws a Training Grounds into hand. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Kinnan for 1. Levi then casts a Dockside Extortionist. It ETBs and he creates 8 treasures. He casts Training Grounds, but in response, J-Rock pays 2 life and casts a Mental Misstep, targeting Training Grounds. It resolves and Levi passes the turn. In his upkeep, Rage wins his Crypt roll. He draws and simply passes the turn. In Eli's upkeep, he loses his Crypt roll and takes 3 life. He draws and moves directly to combat. He swings Silas at Levi. He takes 2, and Eli attempts to move to his end step, but in response, Levi activates Thrasios. He reveals a Steam Vents into play tapped. He does it again, putting a Misty Rainforest into play tapped. He does it a 3rd time, revealing and drawing a Snap. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Levi in the face. The turn then moves to J-Rock. J-Rock draws, moves through phases, and passes the turn. Levi draws and then decides to play his minigame again with Paradise Mantle. He ends up with all of his creatures tapped and 5 floating mana. He uses 2 of the mana to cast a Talisman of Curiosity. He activates Thrasios and reveals a Chain of Vapor into hand. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Dockside for 1. Levi taps his Misty Rainforest, pays 1 life, sacks it, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. Levi casts Chain of Vapor, targeting his own Dockside. In response, Eli loses 2 life and casts a Mental Misstep. It resolves and counters Chain. Levi then casts Snap, targeting Trophy Mage. It resolves, he untaps 2 lands, and then recasts Trophy Mage. It ETBs, and he tutors up a Cloudstone Curio into hand. He casts Cloudstone Curio. In response, J-Rock taps both of his artifacts, adding 4 green through Kinnan. He then taps his land and activates his Thrasios with 1 green mana still floating in his pool. He reveals the One Ring. Bowmaster triggers and Eli pings Dockside a 2nd time, killing it. Then, Cloudstone resolves. Levi casts his commander, Rograk, but in response, J-Rock uses his floating green to cast a Nature's Claim, targeting the Cloudstone. In response, Levi activates Thrasios, revealing a Fierce Guardianship. He casts the Fierce Guardianship for its alternate casting cost, targeting Nature's Claim. but in response, Eli casts Born Upon the Wind, simply hoping to use the cantrip to draw interaction. He draws, and then he casts a Pact of Negation, targeting the Fierce Guardianship. Pact counters Fierce, and Nature's Claim destroys Cloudstone. Levi gains 4 life. He uses his last floating mana to re-equip Paradise Mantle to Trophy Mage. He attempts to pass turn, but in response, Rage casts a Mystical Tutor. He tutors up a Mnemonic Betrayal to the top of his library. The turn then moves to Rage. In his upkeep, Rage loses his Crypt Roll. He draws and taps his Arid Mesa, pays a life, and fetches up a Badlands onto the battlefield. He then casts Mnemonic Betrayal. In response, Levi activates Thrasios twice, revealing a Seedborn Muse and a Force of Will. Free to now simply present a win, Rage gets to work. He casts Eli's Diabolic Intent, sacrificing Codie as an additional cost. He tutors a card into his hand and then casts Rite of Flame. He adds 2 red. He uses those to immediately cast Levi's Dockside. It ETBs and he creates 9 treasures. He casts Eli's Praetor's Grasp, targeting J-Rock. He exiles J-Rock's Demonic Consultation. Rage then casts a Thassa's Oracle. With her ETB on the stack, he casts J-Rock's Demonic Consultation, naming Almighty Brushwag. He exiles his entire library, Thassa's ETB resolves, and Rage wins the game. In the first game, we got to see 2 turbo decks both go burr. The second game had a ton of failed win attempts, but interaction was around every corner. Once it was all used up though, Rage was free to dance right into a great Mnemonic Betrayal win. As always, we had a blast playing. Let us know in the comments what you liked or what you would like to see different. If you did enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, and share with friends. And we will see you back on the stack.